Hey folks, this is Casey and I'm One Mellow Marigold, and today we are prepping the fall garden in Zone 5b. If you caught my planting video, you'll know that we've already gotten our fall seeds sown and on their way, which is amazing. Now we just have to make sure we've got great spots in the garden for them to go to. In particular, my winter squash, they've already got 2 true leaves. They are going like crazy. They are ready to be transplanted. We're going to focus on 3 things today. Number 1, we're going to focus on those winter squash. Since I didn't get a chance to plant them last year, we are going to try out 3 different areas for planting winter squash so we can start to determine what's going to be best for my property. Number 2, we're going to be doing some tomato maintenance. Tomatoes still have a ton of fruit on them yet, so I need to take care of them as best I can to make sure we can get all that fruit into the house for canning. So we're going to be giving them a last trellis. We're going to be removing any dead or diseased plants, things that just aren't producing anymore, and I'll show you a fun experiment we've had going on. And number 3, I really want to experiment with my pepper plants. At this stage, they're doing great, and we have plenty of hot weather to keep them producing. However, I want to move them to potato land to see if they will do better producing fruit up there. The reason I think they'll do better up there has everything to do with sunlight. So let's talk about sunlight first. The number 1 tip that I can give you for prepping your fall garden is to think about sunlight. The sun doesn't take the same path in the sky every year. It only does that if you live down by the equator. Up in Zone 5b, like myself, you're going to see the sun's path change quite a bit over the course of the season. And that's what I'm talking about preparing for. Let me show you what I mean on my property. This is the north side of my property. This corridor is going east-west. At the very height of summer, the sun's path comes right up this way, all the way over our heads, and it sets back there, which means this whole corridor gets a ton of sunshine at the peak of summer. But as the days shorten, the sun's path is going to change. As that path changes and shortens, it's going to curve. It's not going to go this way. It's going to kind of come around. It's going to circle, and it's going to start falling behind all of the big trees and my house. And so you can see we're now getting patches of shade. So when I talk about planting for sunlight, you're going to maybe want to just map out where those shade patterns are going to fall and try to plant in the areas that are still going to give you the best amount of sunlight. And of course, we can expect the same thing on the south side of my property here. So same thing, at the very height of summer, we got straight east-west sun. Everybody got sun all the time. Now that fall is coming, that path is curving and it's getting shorter and it's falling behind the tree line, creating areas of shade. That's something I need to think about when planting my fall garden. But enough of my yapping. Let's get to work. Let's start first with the winter squash. I'm super excited to be growing it this year. I didn't get to grow it last year because quite honestly, at this point in the year, my black walnut tree was starting to drop nuts like crazy. It had a big old mast ear, and it was so much to try to keep up with all the nuts that were falling on the ground, as well as still trying to get a handle on the house and everything it needed for winter, that planting a fall garden just did not seem realistic at all. So yay, we're getting this going. But it means we need to find the right area for it, right? I'm actually going to plant squash in 3 different areas this year. One is going to be the corn patch, the second is going to be potato land, and the third is going to be the area in just to the south of the back barn. We're going to try them in 3 spots, couple of different planting and container methods, and we're just going to see which area grows the best. I've got tons of starts, so we've got plenty. For the corn patch, we are going to be planting our seedlings in the ground, which means we're going to have to protect them somehow, which means I'm going to have to put up some sort of fence. Now, had I done this fencing project earlier, perhaps the bunnies wouldn't have eaten most of the corn, but whatever, here we are. First though, we're going to clean up, we're going to clear some weeds, and we are going to prep the dirt. So I am pulling out any grasses from the middle that aren't serving us, and I'm trimming around the outside to make it easier for the stakes and the fencing to go in. I'm also kind of raking up the dirt a little bit. It has been sitting underneath leaf mulch for quite some time, so I just want to sort of let some of it breathe and kind of level out the surface. I'm going to go ahead and direct transplant 4 squash plants into the area, and I even snuck in a few last minute beans around each stalk of corn. To keep the pests out, we're going to be using chicken wire. So I'm going to come around the outside. I'm just lightly tapping in some bamboo stakes, and then I'm coming around with the chicken wire and using wire or zip ties to attach it to the stakes. It doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to keep the bunnies out. Granted, had I done all this earlier in the year, maybe I'd have more corn plants to speak of, but whatever, here we are. We're not perfect gardeners. Naturally, of course, we have to take a couple of Frisbee breaks. That's just mandatory. And overall, I think he approves of the area. We think it looks great. While we're down on this end, we're going to give our tomatoes some love next. First, you'll notice that I have row covers and sheets out, and that's because we had an early cold snap and nights got below 50 degrees the last 2 nights in a row. It's definitely really early for us. That does not happen often. Thankfully, it was just a little 2-day snap and we're back up to summer temps already. If you want to get the most life out of your tomato plants that you can, you're going to have to start keeping an eye on the evening overnight temperatures. If they start getting below 50, come on out in the evening, cover them up loosely with sheets and row covers to help keep a little bit more warmth around the fruit and those stems. That's going to help prolong their life. Next, we're going to extend our Florida weave trellis up one more time. The tomatoes are starting to get heavy and they could really use all the support they could get until they ripen and we pull them off the vine. And third, let's talk about this fun experiment that I have going on. I previously showed you in my planting video how I use worm castings before transplanting peppers and tomatoes. Well, very often, this will cause seeds that are still in the worm castings to grow like crazy, and you'll have other plants popping up alongside of the plants that you transplanted. For example, look at this cute little squash growing out of this tomatillo. It may never actually form a squash. We have no idea, but I just let that kind of stuff grow most often, especially if it's not going to hurt anything. When I realized this summer I wasn't going to be able to adequately protect my peppers from the bunnies, I decided to let any volunteers, especially tomatoes, grow up around my peppers because I wanted to see how those two might work together. Bunnies don't love tomatoes. They tend to leave your tomatoes alone. So I thought, well, if the pepper's in a pot next to the tomato, will the bunny leave the peppers alone? And yeah, the answer is yes. Here we are. We have thriving pepper plants again, and we have thriving tomatoes sitting right next to those pepper plants. As the tomatoes are growing and producing, the peppers are putting on more and more flowers. It really looks like it's a win-win combination. Meanwhile, as those have been rejuvenating, I have got 4 tomato plants. I think they're the Big Mama variety. None of them did that well this year. In fact, none of them did that well last year here either. I think there's going to be one that just falls out of my rotation. We are going to remove 4 tomato plants that just aren't surviving anymore, and we are going to replace those spaces in the trellis with some of those pepper tomato combos. I really look forward to seeing how these volunteer tomatoes produce. Obviously, I have no idea what kinds they are, and they could be completely cross-pollinated. But let me tell you, I have found that a volunteer tomato is the hardiest tomato. They will grow like under any conditions. So I'm really excited to see what happens with them. Next, we'll focus on planting the winter squash in our second area, which is potato land. So we are going to do these squash in containers, and we're going to repurpose the ones from the tomato plants that we just took out. So we're just going to haul these up the hill like one does and just, casually whip them over the chicken wire fence. No big deal. I want to grow these up here in containers because we already know that there is a mouse/vole problem up here. In fact, Oliver is also chasing a prairie dog who is just trying to get into this potato land area too. So we've got all sorts of critters up here. So I want to put them in containers, just that way the plant stays up off the ground a little bit more. And 2 of the plants in containers up here, we're just going to let spill out over the sides and go where they go, just to see what happens. Once fruit starts developing, like I do with my pie pumpkins, I will put like light mesh bags over the fruit so that it's harder for the voles and the mice to get to. For these 2 in particular, I am going to put up a trellis. I've got a bamboo accordion trellis. If you've never bought these things before, they're amazing. Go for it. They are cheap and they expand to whatever area you need. We're just going to zip tie these to the supports that are up for the garlic bed, and as the squash plants grow, we're going to train them up the trellis. I've got 4 more squash and 1 more area I want to plant them in. We just finished the squash up there. These are where my pie pumpkins are growing and they are doing great. They are in a swimming pool. So we're going to drag 1 more swimming pool over to this side of the property, just outside of the shade line there. And we're going to plant them with no barriers, just like the pie pumpkins. We are just going to let them grow as they grow. So now that we've got our winter squash taken care of, the last thing we're going to tackle today is bringing up some of the peppers and have them also hang out in potato land. One of Hilda's greatest skills in life is always finding the best way to pull down my tripod. I'm going to do peppers totally different next year. We are now getting so much rain early in the spring. For me, it doesn't make sense anymore to plant pepper seeds super early because all that happens is I transplant them outside, we still get a ton of wet weather, and they just sit there and stay dwarfed for like a month until things really dry out. Next year, I'm planting peppers later. I'm just planting peppers later so that it's timed so that they're going outside after those big heavy spring rains are done. What I want to figure out is if peppers overall will do better up in potato land or if they're better down by the tomatoes. Both places get a ton of sun. Potato land now has fencing around it to keep the bunnies out. So I'm just wondering if planting later and also planting up here will make any sort of difference. We got a ton of work done. I'm going to take a break here in the shade. I'm sitting up on the raised bed, and just behind me are the 3rd succession of carrots that I have planted. They're germinating and doing great. We got the winter squash taken care of. We got the tomatoes taken care of. We got the peppers taken care of. The only thing left for a fall garden that we have, we just got to wait for those cabbage and broccoli seedlings to get big enough to transplant. And I got plenty of containers for those. I also have a great spot picked out. Yeah, that's it. We're doing the things. Things are going along swimmingly. Thanks so much for the support. I hope you learned a thing or two and maybe just had a little fun. I love you so much. I'm going to see you on the next one. Bye.